New videos every day.
Are you a fiction writer interested in publishing your work? My name is George Weir, and today I want to talk to you about what it's going to take for you to do that. I suppose the first thing we need to talk about is the traditional publishing route. This is the route where you as a writer go get a literary agent and have that agent work for you to get a publisher, to get an editor of some publishing house. That is the accepted traditional route. That's the route that most everyone goes. There are about 2 million writers out there in America today, and these writers are competing for this very small cadre of agents and editors. You can be one of those if you want to. That's the traditional route. Do bear in mind that it does take some time for that process to work. Typically, what you have to do is you have to write a really good query letter. It's a query. Query, of course, means to ask. It's essentially asking the agent or the editor if they are interested in what you have to show them. For some reason, this particular area, if you really look at it, doesn't make a lot of sense, because what we're talking about is writing a letter and then an agent or an editor being interested in you based upon a letter, but not based upon the fiction that you're writing, with the assumption that, well, if you can write a good query letter, then maybe your story is okay. Now, I would love to be able to tell you that, sure, you're going to write a really good query letter and you're going to zip that letter off to a literary agent. The agent's going to read that letter and is going to go, oh my gosh, I've got to have this guy or this lady in my stable of writers. That sounds like the American dream and it sounds wonderful. However, it's just not very practical. If you take a look at it as a numbers game, of the about 2 million people writing out there, just how many are going to be published next year? The number is probably less than 10,000. So what are your odds that way? Not the best in the world. That's not to say that you shouldn't do it or that you couldn't do it. You definitely could. Now, ideally, you would write an excellent query letter. You would submit that query letter to an editor or to a literary agent, actually, and they would work on your behalf to get you published, and you would be published in no time. That's the American dream. That's a wonderful idea. It doesn't, however, work that way in the real world. The process sometimes can be almost geologic in nature, and it may take months or even years before you see your work in print, if ever. That's just the reality of that situation there. So the traditional route could be your way to go, and I'm not in any way denigrating that route. The odds, however, are severely stacked against you. So the other route that you may consider taking is going directly to the publisher with your work. How would you go about doing that? Well, what you should do is do all the research you can. There are a number of very excellent indexes out there. Number one would be Jeff Herman's Guide to Literary Agents, Editors, and Publishers. In that guide, if you look specifically at the publishers and you look for those publishers that will accept samples of your writing, preferably by email, so there's not a whole lot of time involved in this process, and about 10 to 30 pages or 3 sample chapters, your turnaround time for getting an acceptance or rejection, if that's the case, back can be pretty quick. So that's one way to go. There is a website also that I highly recommend called fictionaddiction.net. And on that website, you can find a number of editors that would be happy to take a look at your work, and you can sort them by whether or not that they'll accept your work by email. Do your homework. Get your work to these guys and these ladies and see what you can get done. It doesn't have to be a long, drawn-out process, and you don't have to get more gray hair in doing it. The third method of getting published, which is my preferred method, is to make a really good friend in the writing field, particularly a published author, someone who will read your work, and if you read theirs and reciprocate by telling them what you think of their work, then you may have a leg up into an industry that seems to be closed to you in any other fashion. Better than going the traditional route or self-publishing or something like that, if you can find your way into this very closed group, or what seems to be a closed group, then you may have an in there. Do not think, though, that just because you have a friend who is a published author, that means you're going to get published. That's just not the case. You have to be good. You have to be able to produce consistently good work and stand behind it. And you also have to actually be a real friend. In a previous video, I talked about being responsible as a writer, or taking responsibility for your work. And that is appropriate for this video as a little bit deeper of a topic, because the question would come up in everything that I've said thus far. Are you writing so that you can be published, so that you can be a name? Or do you enjoy writing? Do you love writing? And as a result of that, will you one day eventually be published? That's a question you're going to have to ask yourself. But it is extremely germane, because if you have a, for want of a better word, a must-have to be a writer, to be a published writer, you may be selling yourself short, when what you should do is take the perspective of, I am actually a great writer. I am going to improve my craft. I'm going to be the best that I can possibly be. And eventually, the world will come to know that. It's really about who you are and who you want to be and why you're doing what you're doing. In a future video, I'm going to delve a little bit more deeply into the mechanics of writing, particularly short story writing, just how you get that perfect product. And in a future video, I want to talk about researching your subject matter. Just what do you need to do, and when do you need to do it? I want to thank you for watching. You're all welcome to come visit my website, www.georgeweir.com. Please give this video a thumbs up. Please leave your comments, and please do subscribe.